What's happening, our family? Taylor Payton here today with thebeginnerdrawingcourse.com, and I'm here to share with you how I study and get better. Okay, so first and foremost, I want to say you gotta have a huge why for doing this. If you don't have a why, such as some deep inner meaning regarding your project or your ambition or your goal, then it's going to be really hard to motivate yourself when you don't want to study up on art or when you don't want to spend 25, 30, 40-minute sessions blasting something that you're not very good at and seeing the results only improve slowly, sometimes a little more exponentially, but usually fairly slowly. So what I'm going to be doing is showing you something that I'm not great at drawing, particularly drawing, I mean line-based artwork, and how I break that down, use the fundamentals, and then slowly improve at it using those same fundamentals. So let's get started. Oh yeah, one thing is that if you don't know what the fundamentals of art are, you're going to have a hard time doing this. And in that case, I recommend you check out the links in the description box below. I have courses for the beginner, on drawing, on the fundamentals, on all the things that you will need to break down something like this and then transpose it into your own skill set for self-growth, self-teaching, and self-expression. So here you can see my very first attempt of the day. Initially, I sketch in the different levels and layers of this place based on the photo that I found on Pinterest. I think the overall study took like 20 minutes, but you can just see here that I'm pretty much just freehanding most of it, but I will go ahead and use the shift key on the keyboard in order to get a straight line, and that is just making it easier to draw the background in general. I've recently been inspired to do backgrounds so I can have a stronger story and a stronger ability to express what I need to for my project Gildian. So that means I'm going to need to make these happen, which means I need to get better at these using what I already know. So as you can see, this is the finished sketch, and there's quite a few things that are okay with it, but there's also some stuff that we want to improve when we're doing our imagination application. So let's talk about what's good here, what could be improved, and how to tackle our next attempt. So before I jump into my imagination application, I always want to find somebody who's doing it better than me, meaning somebody who has way more experience, way more mileage, and just has an idea of what they're actually doing as opposed to sort of hacking it and figuring it out along the way. Because I already have the ability to understand and analyze fundamental aspects of drawing and painting, I can use that knowledge to take their techniques, recapitulate them in my own way, and then use them in the imaginative sort of application that I'm going for. So in this case, I'm looking at Raphael Lacoste, who is a phenomenal artist who, to my understanding, does a lot of background work. And so I like to look at specialists because they've gone much deeper in terms of certain areas and realms and have thus discovered what works really well. So you can see that here, Raphael is using a lot of really interesting textures and lines. He has some dark aspects in the background, popping this forward. His perspective sort of curves to the side instead of a straight-on view, and then all the mark making is fairly organized. We have some vertical lines, some horizontal lines, some diagonal lines, and then we have the juxtaposition of those lines to create a hatching effect. Next, we have a small, dark little silhouette of a figure for scale, and we see some interesting arches that have a lot more variegated stonework than I was doing, and some interesting sort of roof textures as well. So I now know the types of marks I can make. I know generally what sort of shapes to make the architecture, and so thanks to Mr. Lacoste, I can go in with more confidence in my imagination kind of work and take some of these techniques and see how I can apply them in a way that is superior to what we did previously in Clip Studio Paint. As you can see, it's very superior, and so I'm excited to see how much better I can make this already, just taking those couple different tips, studying up on that reference before hopping into the imagination portion, which is pretty much where we're at right now. I stopped here after I had done the initial sketch or lay-in because I wanted to show you what I did differently at this juncture. So keeping in mind some of the things I learned with both of the things that I studied, one very actively, one more observationally, I knew I wanted a different layout, and so I set up my one-point perspective to reflect that. And if you want to know more about perspective, you can always take the beginner drawing course. Both the 8-week and the 16-week have different perspective lessons that you can use to do some kind of lay-ins like this. And now that I have this all set up, I'm basically just going to be coloring over it, or rather inking over it, with the new techniques that I've just learned. And this is pretty much where that's happening. I'm just going in from top to bottom and kind of fluctuating between those different aspects of the image and making things as interesting and textured as I can. At this point, I just want to get used to mark making and creating a sense of what material things are built out of, and creating a little bit of shadow and staying in line with some of the perspective that I laid out, just because we did the work and we want to make sure that it's going to be at least pretty kosher with that, So as I proceed here, I realized that a lot of the mark making was a little excessive for my taste. And again, I'm just experimenting at this point. I don't do a lot of these, and so it bears to try a lot of different things just to see what sort of results you can get. So between making a lot of marks and creating some interesting areas and elements that are much more shadowed and much more blackened and inked, that for me was just a nice way of having some textural contrast, some value contrast, because I'm breaking it down pretty much to black, white, and the grays created by the mark making. And at this point, I just want to stress to you that I am not afraid to fail. I really want to try stuff here and figure out what works and what doesn't. And it's really a matter of just being unafraid to mess up. And I did get upset when I did mess up too. Even though I'm not afraid to fail, it still hurts. It still emotionally has a cost. So this is pretty much where I ended this image after I decided that I had noodled on it long enough and beat it up with a bunch of mark making. It was enjoyable to create at points, and at other points it was very frustrating, because that is the growing pain that you start to feel when you're outside of your comfort zone. And because I am a sucker for artistic growth, I am also by proxy a sucker for pain. So here I am doing another sketch, even though it was already 11 o'clock, and I just really wasn't happy with the first one. I knew that I wanted to try out some more stuff. Even if I did worse than the first one, I wanted to know why. I just have this experimental mindset when I'm starting to learn something new or practice something new. Even though I have these artistic fundamentals, there's so much nuance and so much technique and process that goes in to creating an image outside of the norm for yourself. So whether that is a new perspective, a new subject matter, a completely new genre, exploring these areas is something that costs a lot of focus, a lot of attention, and again, can end up hurting sometimes. But that's okay, because you want to grow. You want to not strive for pain, but to know that pain is indicative of heading in a direction that is not charted for you. Even the stuff we're good at, we sometimes have bad drawing days. But I digress. Basically, this was my second attempt at something that had a little bit more of a town type vibe, a little bit more of a city street vibe, like the Raphael Lacoste reference we looked at. And I have one final attempt after this, even on my iPad, which I also imported into the software, so you can see that process, only about 30 seconds long. But in this one, I just wanted to have a lot less of a fussiness about the mark making, because there were so many marks in the previous image. So the one thing I wanted to scale back was having all that visual noise, and instead just really being focused on where I place those textural marks and points. And I think I was successful in that capacity, and I still have a background that is outside of my comfort zone and that looks reasonable. It's not great, it's not amazing, it's not breathtaking, but you know what? It is a background nonetheless, and you'll get to see all these at the end too. So this is me trying the same process on the iPad, more or less, just sketching the same thing over and over. You see, I'm not deviating too greatly from the subject matter. There's always going to be these walls and this focal point and this one-point perspective, and that's really what I'm trying to get down here. I'm using the same things over and over and creating a process for that. I'm not jumping too far away. You don't see me drawing trees. You don't see me drawing all this other crazy stuff. You see me finishing up these sketches, these final sketches here. And this is pretty much the end of the video. It's going and taking an idea and something outside of your comfort zone, breaking it down with fundamentals, and last but not least, trying a bunch of different things to see where you land, what you can do better next time, and how you can continue to improve. If this video was helpful, feel free to like, subscribe, and share, and check out the links in the description box. I have linked to Mr. Lacoste's work, as well as all of the courses and tutorials that I've made to help you use fundamentals to do similar things or even better things. So again, I'll see you in the next video. Happy drawing!